Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my presentation about bio-inspired toughening of composites in 3D printing. My name is Johannes Stöger, and I'm working at the Institute of Materials Science and Technology at TU Wien. For a better understanding of the general idea behind my research, I would like to split the title of my presentation into 3 parts. These parts contain the terms bio-inspired, toughening, and 3D printing, which I will discuss separately in the beginning. So without further ado, let's start with the first term, bio-inspired. The term bio-inspired basically refers to an idea which is influenced by a naturally existing phenomenon. In my case, this phenomenon are the remarkable mechanical properties of structures built by living organisms. As an example, I would like to show you the deep-sea sponge Euplectella aspergillum. These creatures can be found on the ground of the Western Pacific. They are fixed to the ground of the ocean through a hook and filter the flushing seawater. If the outermost organic layer of the sponge is removed, one can find the siliceous skeleton of this animal. The skeleton is composed of so-called spicules. These are small rods containing 99% silicon dioxide and only 1% of organic proteins. Each spicule is made up of micron-thick concentric rings of silica separated by thin organic material layers. These soft material layers measure only 5 to 10 nanometers in height. Although there is only 1% of proteins present in these spicules, the mechanical properties are improved remarkably. The fracture resistance of the skeleton is 3 times higher than that of homogeneous silica without deteriorating other mechanical properties. Through these building concepts, these spicules and the skeleton itself conserve their strength and stiffness naturally gained by the high glass content and additionally derive high fracture toughness values. So why are the mechanical properties of this deep-sea sponge so fascinating? If you look at the mechanical properties of engineered material, it is a very challenging task to produce parts which are strong and stiff on one hand and tough on the other. While strength and stiffness provide high load-bearing capability, high toughness prohibits fracture. Typically, these properties are somewhat mutually exclusive. Toughness refers to the energy per volume unit dissipated up to the point of fracture. Fracture toughness specifically refers to a material's ability to resist crack growth in the inevitable presence of defects. At the left side, you can see the stress-strain curve derived from an uniaxial tensile test, for example. The blue line representing a strong and stiff material, which is brittle on the other hand. The red line represents the behavior of a tough material, which is very compliant as a drawback. The ideal scenario would be a material featuring a high Young's modulus and a high tensile strength for load-bearing purposes, as well as high elongation at break for high fracture toughness. We've seen before that the deep-sea sponge manages this impossible task to gain high load-bearing without being brittle like glass. The underlying effect is called the material inhomogeneity effect. The fracture toughness of a brittle bulk material can be drastically increased by the introduction of thin compliant material layers. For this effect to work, the mechanical properties of these materials have to differ substantially. The Young's modulus of the bulk material must be at least 5 times higher than the Young's modulus of the compliant material. On the left side, you can see a testing sample under tension from top and bottom. Small defects are located inside the sample and statistically distributed. If tension occurs, a crack will start to emerge from these already existing defects. This crack will grow and propagate through the sample until fracture occurs. The same testing procedure is done with a testing sample where thin layers of another material with significantly lower Young's modulus are inserted. These compliant layers hinder the propagation of the cracks and therefore increase the resistance to fracture. As these soft material layers are very thin, they do not change the other mechanical properties of the bulk material remarkably. With that, I would like to come to the third term, which is 3D printing. 3D printing is based on the principle of the production of samples in a layer-wise process. In our case, the raw materials are photopolymers based on acrylates and metacrylates. In combination with the photoinitiator, these liquid substances form polymer chains and solidify by radical chain polymerization when exposed to a suited light source. The principle of radical chain polymerization is used in a stereolithographic or SLA process. The liquid material inside the vat is exposed to a UV light source, which induces the solidification of the resin. The hardened material sticks to the building platform. After the solidification of the first material layer, the platform is moved upwards and the vat is coated with fresh liquid resin by a coating mechanism. Repeating this process, we can build a three-dimensional part layer by layer. In this particular study, the samples are a composite consisting of inorganic tricalcium phosphate and organic polymers. These samples tend to be very stiff and show almost no elongation at break, resulting in a very brittle behavior. In order to adapt the mechanical properties and improve the toughness of the brittle bulk material, we mimicked the structure of the spicules of the deep sea sponge. A hybrid printing system able to produce samples out of two different raw materials is used. This system consists of the aforementioned SLA process and an inkjet printing system. The SLA produces layers of strong and stiff material, while the inkjet system yields soft, compliant material layers. In the first step, the building platform moves into the vat with the liquid resin, and UV light is used to solidify the first layer. The building platform with the adherent layer moves upwards and rotates so that the layer faces an inkjet printhead, which is located above the SLA printer. Now, the printhead places small droplets of ink onto the solidified resin layer. The liquid ink is solidified using an LED array. The solidified ink adheres to the resin layer and the building platform rotates downwards again. It immerses into the resin vat and the second resin layer is printed. This process is repeated until a two-material part is printed. The material composition for the resin, which is white, and the ink, which is red, differ substantially. The resin consists of different acrylates and metacrylates to ensure sufficient reactivity and cross-linking. Additionally, a photoinitiator is required for the start of the polymerization process. An absorber prohibits polymerization at undesired locations due to light scattering. Finally, tricalcium phosphate particles are used as a filler to create a stiff and brittle material. The ink, on the other hand, is composed of a low viscosity acrylate, a cross-linking agent, a photoinitiator, and a red coloring agent. This composition leads to a very soft and compliant material. 3 sample groups are printed for the verification of the concept. The first group is built of separated alternating layers of resin and ink. This group represents the bio-inspired approach. The second group is the reference group, solely consisting of the resin. This resembles the bulk material. To ensure that a potential effect is related to the structure of the samples with separated material layers and not from the addition of a soft material, a third group is produced. This group consists of a blend of resin and ink mixed before the printing process. These samples are printed solely with the SLA process. The amount and the ratio of ink and resin for groups 1 and 3 are identical. A picture of a group 1 and a group 3 sample can be seen on the left side. The red color arises from the printed ink. For a group 1 sample, light microscope imaging of the cross-section can be seen in the middle. The resin layers are displayed in white areas, while the ink layers are smaller dark lines. On the right side, a scanning electron microscope imaging with EDX measurement is displayed. The areas containing ink are visible by their low amount of calcium content. To test the mechanical properties of the printed parts, Dunstad impact strength tests are conducted. This norm is chosen over more conventional ones like Charpy due to the limited space on the building platform. The samples have a length of 15 mm in width, 10 mm in height, and 4 mm. A total of 80 layers manufactured to gain this height. The samples displayed with S are placed in the machine and fixed between the two thrust blocks TB. A hammer H swings downwards and punches through the sample. The absorbed energy of the samples can be deduced from the height of the hammer reached after punching through the sample. This energy is equivalent to the fracture toughness of the sample. The direction of the force is perpendicular to the interfaces of the layers. This testing setup ensures that the crack has to propagate through all layers of the specimen. Additionally, 3-point bending tests are conducted to gain insight into how other mechanical properties, mainly Young's modulus and bending strength, are influenced by the compliant material layers. The results of both Dunstad impact strength tests and 3-point bending tests show promising results. The impact strength of samples produced with the bio-inspired approach of alternating material layers displays a significantly higher value in impact strength compared to the other two groups. Furthermore, there is virtually no difference between the samples of group 2 and 3. This implies that the simple addition of the soft ink material is not responsible for the toughening effect. It has no impact at all if mixed into the liquid resin before the actual printing process. The effect arises from the existence of separated layers of materials with varying mechanical properties. Bending tests show a significant decrease in Young's modulus and an increase in elongation at break for group 1 in comparison to the other two groups. Again, this signifies the impact of the internal structure of the parts, since there is no difference between groups 2 and 3. The increase in elongation at break corresponds to the higher impact strength obtained by the Dunstad tests. However, the decrease in Young's modulus is not favored and resembles a degradation of the desired mechanical properties. In the future, the amount of ink as well as the jetting patterns will be varied to find a favorable trade-off between increasing fracture toughness while also conserving the remaining mechanical properties. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention.